Assalamu alaikum and hello to my non-Muslim viewers. I was reading the New Testament and I read some pretty interesting things in there. So I read, so how Christians or Jews and Christians say that the Bible is the inspired Word of God and it's God breathed and things like that. Well, no. Um, the biblical authors, especially the New Testament authors, were wrong or just expressing their own opinions. So in reality, the New Testament is the New Testament authors were wrong or they were just expressing their own opinions. So what that means is that the New Testament is the word of man. It's not the word of God. So I'll read the relevant verses right now. But to the rest speak I, not the Lord. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 12. Who wrote 1 Corinthians? Paul. So Paul is basically saying that he speaks, not the Lord. Um, Paul also says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 27, or I'm sorry, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 25. Now concerning virgins I have no commandment of the Lord, yet I give my judgment. So it seems like the New Testament is the authors of the New Testament were expressing their own opinion and they were wrong about a lot of things. So it's possible that it's Paul's opinion that Jesus was crucified and resurrected, and his gospel beat out the disciples' gospel, whatever the disciples were preaching about Jesus' um, crucifixion, or whatever the disciples were teaching about Jesus and the crucifixion, etc. So it's very possible that the origins of the New Testament gospel, which is that Jesus died and was resurrected, is Paul's gospel and not the disciples' gospel, or not what the disciples were teaching. Because after all, the disciples didn't write anything down. So who knows what they were teaching and preaching. So I compare this. So we know from 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 12 and 1 Corinthians chapter 7 verse 25 that Paul was just expressing his own opinions and he was wrong about a lot of stuff. So it's possible it was his opinion that Jesus was crucified, died, and was resurrected, but this doesn't reflect what the disciples were teaching and preaching about Jesus. So what about the Quran? The Quran says it's from Allah, and Allah is God. So the Quran says it's from God in many places. In the Quran chapter 10 verse 109, Quran chapter 15 verse 9, Quran chapter 26 verse 6, and the Quran chapter 6 verse 19. So the Quran says it's the word of God, and the New Testament says it's the word of man. And there's another verse in 2 Maccabees chapter 15 verse 39, which says, if I have done well, it has become the history. It is what I desired, but if not so perfectly, it must be pardoned me. 2 Maccabees chapter 15 verse 39. So that's further indication that the New Testament or the biblical authors were wrong or just expressing their own opinions. So how can we trust the New Testament when it's the word of man, when it clearly says it's the word of man instead of being the word of God? So that's a question I want Christians to answer honestly, as opposed to the Quran, where the Quran says it's from God. In the Quran chapter 10 verse 109, Quran chapter 15 verse 9, Quran chapter 26 verse 6, and Quran chapter 6 verse 19, etc., etc. And there are many other verses, but I think you get the point. So something to think about. Thanks a lot.